ಸಂಸಾರದಾವಾನಲನಿದಲೋಕ ತ್ರಣಯ ಕಾರುಣ್ಯ ಗಣ ಗಣತ್ವಂ ಪ್ರಪತ್ಸ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಗುಣರ್ನವಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರೋ ಶ್ರೀ ಚರಣರವಿಂದಂ ನವಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರೋ ಶ್ರೀ ಚರಣರವಿಂದಂ ವಂದೇ ಗುರೋ ಶ್ರೀ ಚರಣರವಿಂದಂ महाप्रभो कीर्तन नृत्य गीत वदित्रमाद्यान् मनसो रसेन नृत्य गीत वदित्रमाद्यान् मनसो रसेन रोमाञ्चकाम्पश्रुतरङ्गबाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दं श्रीविग्रहाराधननित्यानाना शृङ्गारतन्मन्दिरमर्जनादौ युक्तस्य भक्तं शनियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसादो स्वादन्नतृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्गान् कृत्वैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्नां माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्नां प्रतीक्षणा स्वाधनलोलुपास्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् निकुञ्जयोनो रतिकेली सिद्ध्याय यायालिभिर्युक्तेरपेक्षणीया तत्र त्रिदाक्षादतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीचरणारविन्दं साक्षाद्धरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रैरुक्तस्तथा भाव्यत एव शब्दिः किन्तु प्रभोर्या प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादान्न गति कुतोऽपि भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादान्न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायन् सुवंस्तस्य यशस्त्रीसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Hare Hariharaya Nama Krishnaya Davaya Namaha Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudana Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohana Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavad Gita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavad Gita Sri Rupa Sanatan Bhakta Raghunatha Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunatha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Jayo Radha Nila Madhav Sri Radhe Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Sri Radhe Jayo Jagannatha Jayo Baladeva Jayo Subhadrama Jayo Sudarshan Chakra Jayo Subhadrama Jayo Sudarshan Chakra Jayo Sitaram Jayo Lakshmana Hanuman Sitaram Jayo Lakshmana Hanuman Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol Ganga Mai ki jai, Yamuna Mai ki jai, Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi ki jai, Samaveta Bhaktavinda ki jai, Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bo. All glory to the assembled devotees, all glory to the assembled devotees, all glory to the assembled devotees, all glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga, all glory to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Prahlad Lad Daine. Hiranyakasipurvakshaha. Silatan kanakhalaye. Ito nasimha parto nasimha. Yato yato yami tato nasimha. Mahe nasimha hidaye nasimha. Narasimhamadim saranam prapadye. Tav kar kamalavare nakham adbhut sringa. Dalita hiranyakasipu tanu bhringa. Kesavadhrita nar hari rupa. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jaya Kesavendrita Nar Hari Rupa. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jaya Kesavendrita Nar Hari Rupa. Jagadish Hare. Jaya Narasimhadev, Jaya Narasimhadev, Jaya Narasimhadev, Jaya Narasimhadev. Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Bhakta Prahlad. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. भगवान की जय।
वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः।
वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवत्याय नमः।
श्री वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः।
वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवत्याय नमः।
श्री वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्ण भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः।
वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवत्याय नमः।
वृंदाय तुलसी देवी माता की जय।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ये अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ये अभिलाषी ये तुम्हारा शरण लोय तारा वंश पूर्ण होय तुम्हारा शरण लोय तारा वंश पूर्ण होय कृपा करी करो तारे वृंदावनवासी नयने हेरिबो सदा जुगल रूप राशि এই নিবেদন দারো সখীর অনুগত করো सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी दीन कृष्ण दास कोई जन मोरा होय जन मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदाई नवासी श्री राधा यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi. Jaya Bhakti Devi, Jaya Bhakti Devi, Jaya Bhakti Devi, Jaya Bhakti Devi. Jaya Bhakti Devi, Jaya Bhakti Devi, Jaya Bhakti. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
also the same beginning and intention of action. Every devotee who commits a Vaishnava must have regard and vision and method. Not Krikachi desire success, Krishna Prema. Now let us promote hope and success from all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just as I trees who can fulfill everyone. They are full of compassion, tolerance, and instruction.
पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंतकोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय।
Shri Chaitanya Shastakam ki jai. Cheto Darpana Marjanam Tava Mahatava ki Nirvapanam. Shriya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam. Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipatam Purnamita Swadanam. Sarvatma Snanam Paravijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Nanam Akadi Bhavadanja Sarva Shaktis. Tatrahita Niyamita Smaranena Kalaha. Edashi Tava Kripa Bhagavan Mamapi. Durdevam Idisham Iha Janinanuragaha. Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorati Sahishnuna. Amanna Manadina Kirtanya Sada Harihi. Na dhanam na chanam na sundarim kavitamba jagadisha kamaye. Mama jammani jamanishvare bhavata bhaktir haituki Ainanda Januja Kinkaram Taditam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddha Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stita Duri Sadvesham Vichintaya Nayanam Garadashu Taraya Vadnam Gagadarya Gira Puragai Nishtam Vapurkada Tava Nama Dhane Bhavishati Yugaitam Nishena Chakshusha Pravishaitam Shunyaitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Viratena Me Ashri Seva Bhadratam Vidnashtumam Adarshana Marhatam Karotuva Yatha Tatha Va Vidadhatu Lampato Mat Prananatha Susaheva Naparaha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shastakam ki jai. Glory to Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated through years
and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. Those you have hundreds of millions of names for Krishna and Govinda. These transcendental names you invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. Of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord. I have no desire to accumulate wealth. Now do you want a number of followers? I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. Oh, son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. At some or other, I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. Oh, go, my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love? Constantly when I chant your holy name, when will my voice choke up? And when will the hairs of my body stand on at the recitation of your name? Oh, Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all waking in the world lunar absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Sri Chaitanya Shastakam ki jai. Sri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Chalakaya Chakshurtam Militam Yena तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमः। ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्ता स्वामिनिधि नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणी निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणी नमः। ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिसिद्धान्ता सरस्वती नामिने श्रीवर्षभानवी देवी दयितया कृपाप्रोदे कृष्णसम्बन्धविज्ञानदायिने प्रभवे नमः।
Ujjvala Premadya Shri Banda Bhaktida Shri Guru Karuna Shakti Vigraha Mastate Namaste Bhavani Shri Murtaye Dintarine Rupanuga Virudaka Advantaharine
नमो गौरकिशोराय
Shaya
साक्षात्
Sakshat Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambhade Padambujayate Namaha
सच्चिदानन्दनामिने
Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga
गौरशक्तिस्वरूपाय
Varayate
गौरविर्भवभूतेस्त्वं
Bhavavastvam
निर्देष्ट
Nirdeshta
सज्जना
Priya
वैष्णव सर्वधर्माश्री जगन्नाथाय ते नमः। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो
Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha
नमो महदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्यनाम्ने गौरे द्विषे नमः। पंचतत्वकं कृष्णं भक्तरूपस्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकं हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते जयतं सुरतं पवनमन्दमतेर्गति मत्सर्वस्वपदं भोजो राधामदनमोहनो दिव्याद्विन्दरण्यकल्पद्रुमदा श्रीमद्रत्नागरा सिंहासनस्थौ Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Prasthadibhi Sevamano Samadhi Sriman Rasarasarambi Swamsi Vatatastita Karsan Venusvanair Gopir Gopinada Sriyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Guru Pranama Prayers Ki Jai. Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadi Radhe Govinda Sarva Karana Karana चिंतामणि प्रकार शत्मसु कल्पवृक्ष लक्षावृतमीषु सुरभिरभिपालयन्तं लक्ष्मीसहस्रशतसम्भ्रम गोविन्दम् आदिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि Nunn Kanantamanabinda Dalayataksam Barhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Kandarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Jibanga Lalita Nita Prakasham Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Anjani Yasya Sakalendriya Rittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sudurlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Munipungamanam
Sopyasti yat prabhadasim yavichintya tatve govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami yat mokya sora chayatum jagadanda kotim yas chakti rasti jagadanda chayayadanta andanta rasta paramanu chayanta rasta govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami yat bhava bhavitatiyo manijasta samprapya rupa mahima sanayana bhusa suktar yameva nigamai pratadai sruduvanti govindam tamaham bhajami premanjana charita bhakti ananda chinmaya rasa bhavita bhista birya eva nijarupa daya kalabi goloka eva nivasata kilatma bhuto govindo madi purisham tamaham bhajami premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santaksadeva hidesu vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achintya gunaswarupam govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami ramadi murti sukalani menatistan Nanavataram akarod bhuvanesu kintu Krishna swayam samabhavat paramam pumamyo govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Translation of Brahma Samhita. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the Supreme Godhead. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desire. In abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feathers, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers beautified with the moon locket, whose 2 hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shamsundar is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure, unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, and is the beginning and the eternal Purusha, yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof in his work of creation. Potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, and conveyances and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities in the company of her confidants, Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Sham Sundara, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrsimha, Vamana, etc. as his subjective portions. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, the Brahma Samhita ki jai. Okay, so we're going to continue today studying the 13th chapter, Bhagavad Gita. Maybe we should end it today, I hope. I'm gonna go back to the verse number 5, and then come to where we stopped yesterday. So verse number 5 says, this is 13th chapter, verse number 5 of Bhagavad Gita. Rishibir Bahuda Gitam Chandro Bir Vividai Pritak Brahma Sutra Padaischaiva Hetumat Bir Vinishchitai. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of the activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. Okay, so this is 13th chapter, which is called Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. So we're going to be studying a complete enumeration or a complete description of what is the supreme absolute truth about Krishna in this chapter. Now, we're not going to go through the whole chapter. We're just going through the beginning part, which discusses, number 1, what's called Brahmapucham. That means the 5 types of stages of Brahman realization. That's point 1. Then point 2, we study the 24 elements of the material world, or material nature. And at point number 3, we study the 20 principles of real knowledge. Okay, so that's the 5 stages of Brahman realization. So it's beginning with Brahman, right? We say that there are 3 stages of understanding Krishna. First stage is Brahman, the effulgence emanating from the body of Krishna. And then second stage is the material nature. And then the third stage is what is real knowledge. And then after that, it goes into what is, what you would say, let me just get this straight. What is knowable, and knowing which you will taste the eternal, the Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, Krishna says, lies beyond the cause and effect of the material world. So now it's going to, once we understand what real knowledge is, we understand what the 24 elements of material nature is, we understand the 5 levels of Brahman realization. Then we begin to go back and understand even more thoroughly what is Brahman, what is Paramatma, and what is Bhagavan or Krishna. So this chapter is very, very comprehensive. it explains in a very, let's say, detailed way how to understand the jiva, the material nature, and Krishna. And Krishna, and there's three levels of understanding Krishna: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Okay, so we'll come back now to the first principle, which is the 5 levels of Brahman realization. And this is explained from what's called the Taittiriya Upanishad, 2nd canto, 9th chapter. It says, there's a manifestation of the Lord's energy known as Annamaya, dependence upon food for existence. This, this is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. So every child, as soon as they're born, they're looking for food. And they discover food at the mother's breast. And later on, they're fed food also. So this is a beginning stage of realization. They realize God in the form of food. That's a material realization of God. And that's called Annamoya. Anna means grains. And so it's this dependence upon food for existence. This is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then, in Pranamoya, after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in food, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms or life forms. Okay, so you see, oh, there's a mother. She's the source of my food. But then you see, oh, there's an uncle, there's an auntie, there's a father, there's a grandfather, there's grandmother. So these are all different life forms. So now you go from Annamaya, or seeing God as food, to seeing all these personalities that are like God, because they're supplying the food and they're supplying other necessities, right? So then that's called Pranamoya, seeing life symptoms. Then in Pranamoya, after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in food, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms or life forms. In Jnanamoya, this is the 3rd stage of material realization of God, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. So the child now grows up more and begins to think, to feel, and to will. They have desires. They have things they like, they have things they don't like. So this is called Jnanamoya, or realization extends beyond the living symptoms of different people to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there's Brahman realization, called Vijnanamaya, in which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. So, living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. So one enters into this subtle understanding of things in the mind and the intelligence. That's called Vijnanamaya. In other words, they begin to develop understanding that I am not this body. I am an eternal soul. And then next, the supreme stage is Anandamaya, realization of the all-blissful nature in relationship with Krishna. Thus, there are 5 stages of Brahman realization, or realization of spirituality, which are called Brahmapucham. Out of these, the first 3, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya, involve the fields of activities of the living entities. Transcendental to all these fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandamaya. The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying, Anandamaya Vyasat, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is by nature full of joy. To enjoy his transcendental bliss, he expands into Vijnanamaya, when you realize, I am not this body, I'm an eternal soul. And then Pranamaya, there are life symptoms, and Jnanamoya, there's the mind, the intelligence, and Anamoya, there's food. So actually it's Vijnanamoya, Jnanamoya, Pranamaya, and Anamoya. In the field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer, and different from him is the Anandamaya. Anandamaya means Krishna's transcendental, loving devotion and ecstatic relationships. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy in dovetailing himself with the Anandamaya, then he becomes perfect. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as the supreme knower of the field, the living entity as the subordinate knower, and the nature of the field of activities. One has to search for this truth in the Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra. So here we see the summary of this, what we just discussed, is this last sentence, which says, the real picture of the Supreme Lord as the supreme knower of the field. What is the field? The field is the body and the material world. That's where we're acting. So the real picture of the Supreme Lord as the supreme knower of the field, because he's present as the super soul in the heart of everyone. So he knows not only our body, like your body or my body, he knows all bodies, because he's present in every body. And therefore, he's the supreme knower. We are the subordinate knower. All we know about is our own body. We don't really know what's going on in other people's bodies. Krishna does, but we don't know that. So therefore, the body is the field of activity for every living entity. But for Krishna, he is present in all the bodies, so he knows all the fields of activity of everyone. Therefore, he is the supreme knower. And the living entity, you and me, we are subordinate knowers. Okay? And the nature of the field of activities. One has to search for this truth in the Vedanta Sutra. It is mentioned here that the codes of the Brahma Sutra are very nicely arranged according to cause and effect. Some of the sutras or aphorisms are Navidyat Ashrute, which is the field of activity, meaning the body. And then Natma Shrute, which is the living entity, you and me. And then Paratu Touch Shrute, which is what? It is the Supreme Lord himself. So the first aphorism, or first statement, indicates the field of activities. That's the material body of all the living entities. The second indicates the living entity, the person who's conscious in the body. And the third indicates the Supreme Lord, the summum bonum, the supreme consciousness in all bodies and manifestations of various entities. So this is the way that we begin to understand who we are, who Krishna is, and what is our relationship with Krishna. And it's done in a very scientific way. If we understand this, we become free of ignorance and we begin to function in a realistic way in our relationship with Krishna. So you see, this 13th chapter is very philosophical, and it's clearly explaining the different levels of consciousness. And don't forget, we do not have evolution of the body. We have evolution of consciousness. So this is showing the different stages of consciousness that the living entity can have. And the highest stage is ecstatic love for Krishna. It's full of ecstasy, unending bliss. Okay. So we have Anamoya, the first realization of God in the form of food. It's a material realization of God. Then the second realization of Brahman, or spirituality, is understanding life symptoms. So not only our mother is alive, but our father is alive, uncles and aunties are alive, and grandfathers and grandmothers are alive, and neighbors are alive, this one and that one. So now the child knows more than just food. The child also sees living entities. And then the third level is Jnanamoya. The child has a mind and is able to think and differentiate things. So that's a little more subtle level of realization of God. And all three of those, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya, are materialistic realizations of God. And then the next level is Vijnanamaya. The child sees that there's a difference between the soul and the body. And now they're entering into spirituality. And then there's Anandamaya, the highest stage of self-realization, where one sees the relationship between the individual soul and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? And one attains ecstatic love for the Lord. Okay, so once we've studied the different levels of spiritual realization, now we study the 24 elements of the material world in verses 13th chapter, verses 6 and 7. So what are these 24 elements in the material world? Well, you have number one, the Mahabhutas. Mahabhutas are the 5 gross elements. Notice the word gross. So there's earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And it's actually beginning by ether, then fire, then water, and then ether, which is space. Then there's air, then there's fire, there's water, and then there's earth. And along with them come what you would call earth, water, fire, air, ether. There is in earth, well, in the ether, there's space, and then air, there's touch, and then air, and then fire, there's form, and then there is water, there is taste, and then there's earth, there's earth is smell. Okay? So you go from the subtle, which is the ether, which is space, to all the way to the gross, which is smell. Okay? So there's an expansion of the material elements. So there are 5 material elements, gross material elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then there is the 5 senses for acquiring knowledge: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. And then there is the 5 objects of the senses: seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, feeling. And then there are the 5 working senses: the arms, the legs, the speech, and then the anus and the genital. Those are the working senses. So now what do we have? We have 20 elements, right? Then there are the subtle elements: the mind, intelligence, and ego. We have 23 now. And 24 is the total material energy, or the Mahatattva, which is coming from the subtle material energy, which is called the Pradhana, which is made up of the 3 modes of material nature. Okay, so now we're at 24 elements of the material nature. Okay, then we have something more than that also. We have what's called desire, hatred, and happiness, and distress. What are these things? These things are interactions or representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. So everyone is experiencing sometime in their life desire, hatred, happiness, and distress. And therefore, on top of all that, we have what's called the living symptoms, which is understood by consciousness and convictions. Convictions are things that we believe, and consciousness is what we're perceiving. And these are manifestations of the subtle body, the mind, and intelligence, and ego. So we have the gross interactions, desire, hatred, happiness, and distress. And now we have the subtle symptoms, which are consciousness and convictions, which are manifestations of the subtle body, the mind, the intelligence, and the ego. And these subtle elements are included within the field of activities also, because we're experiencing them. Then, the 5 great elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and sky, or earth, water, fire, air, ether, the 5 great elements, are a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called the materialistic conception, or tamasa buddhi, intelligence and ignorance. Now, what is intelligence and ignorance? We had Chaitanya Sundar yesterday read off what we read, what's on that 4th panel. We should do it again now to get a clearer understanding. This is intelligence and ignorance. It's called tamasa buddhi. This is what's going on in schools today. This is what is keeping people in the cycle of birth and death. So, who wants to read off those? Go ahead. No, let him do it. Take your time, don't go fast. You have to. If we understand what this tamasa buddhi is, then we'll understand what's going on in schools. Just stand up. You're sitting on top. Yeah. Take your coat off. Yeah, that's it, good.
Material conception of life. The material conception of life is an illusory set of beliefs that keep people bound up in the cycle of repeated birth, old age, disease, and death. It is taught in modern schools to unwitting children so that they will grow up to have more faith in mundane science than belief in God as the supreme origin of all creation. Atheistic humanism pedagogy is the educational theory used in public schools. It denies belief in God or a supernatural being who is the creator and proprietor of everything, material and spiritual. Humanists believe that this life is the only life we have and reject the existence of the eternal spiritual world. It is based on the belief that there is only matter and that knowledge is uniquely achieved by experience in the material world.
So there's no question of receiving knowledge from Shastra, you see. They say the only way we can understand things is by studying matter. So read that one again.
Atheistic humanism pedagogy is the educational
Pedagogy means the principle that they are following to understand knowledge. Pedagogy is a big word, but it means how you understand things. So now you're going to hear how they understand.
Is the educational theory used in public
You see, it's a theory. It's not fact, it's a theory, right? Go ahead.
it denies belief in God or a supernatural being who is the creator and proprietor of everything material and spiritual.
So they reject God and any information about God or from God. Go ahead. In other words, they're rejecting all Shastras.
Humanists believe that this life is the only life we have and reject the existence of the eternal spiritual world.
So they don't believe that there's reincarnation or life after death. Okay, go ahead.
It is based on the belief that there is only matter and that knowledge is uniquely achieved by experience in the material world.
That's it. So what do you experience in the material world? Birth, death, old age, and disease. So what are you going to learn about the soul? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So you don't believe that the soul exists. You don't believe God exists. You don't believe the spiritual world exists. You don't believe there's anything after death. You only believe there's one life, that's it. And you only believe that you are this body. You see how vicious this is. This is like terrible. Go ahead.
Atheistic humanism claims human beings are completely independent and self-reliant of any supernatural causes.
So in other words, we're independent. You really think we're independent? How can you say that? Everything in our life is dependent on Krishna or God. If the sun doesn't come up, we would all die. If the earth doesn't rotate in a predictable way, there would be chaos. You wouldn't be able to predict anything, you see. So we're completely dependent, and these fools are saying we're independent. Go ahead.
The following false concepts are the basis of this material conception of life and atheistic humanism that undermine faith in God. There is no scientific validation that God exists.
This is point one.
Point one.
You cannot validate scientifically through experimentation the existence of God. That's what they say. Go ahead.
One can understand the truth only by experimental science, logic, reason, empiricism, or the theory.
Empiricism means studying only matter. There's no such thing as studying spirit.
Or the theory that knowledge is derived only from sense experience. 2. Denial of spiritual reality. Material conception of life denies the existence of a supreme God and his subordinate spiritual personalities, demigods, that influence human behavior and nature.
So they reject the existence of the demigods, they reject the existence of Krishna and the spiritual world.
3. Only one life, no reincarnation. This misconception denies the existence of the individual eternal soul, rejects reincarnation, and convinces people that they are independent to do whatever they want with no consequences after death.
After death. In other words, there's nothing after death. So you don't have to worry about karma and things like that. Go ahead.
4. Sense gratification is the soul of life. For sustained sense gratification, one needs money by any means. This is the concept of life summarized as work hard and play hard, performing well in one's job to earn a lot of money and then partake in as much self-indulgence and gratification as possible. 5. Holy scriptures are mythological. Mythological. This false concept.
Mythological means they're not. It's just speculation. It's not true.
Yeah.
It's something made up. It's a myth. Meaning, whatever you read in the Shastras like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, it's just something made up. There's no foundation to it. It's not scientific.
In India, they made us believe like that, Maharaj.
Of course.
In schools also, they tell Ramayana, Mahabharata or mythological stories.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You see, the same thing that's in the United States, it's in India.
Yeah.
This is because that atheistic humanism is the basis of educational study today. It's been for a long time. That's why you have so many people they don't actually believe in the Shastras anymore. They believe it's just mythological. You can play with it, but you don't have to take it seriously.
This false concept nullifies the validity of the holy scriptures as bona fide sources of knowledge. If out of curiosity one reads only scriptures, he or she can speculate and interpret them whimsically.
So in other words, they also say, look, if you want to read the scriptures, you can, but you can speculate as much as you want, because it's all mythological. You can speculate all you want on what you think it means. Everyone can have their own opinion of what the Shastra says with their own interpretations.
6. Everything is relative. There are no absolutes. By this false concept, one leads an irresponsible life without a moral compass and rejects the authority of God and His instructions.
So a compass helps you to understand which way is north, so that you don't get lost when you're hiking, right? Well, by rejecting the validity of the Vedas and rejecting the existence of God, you no longer have a compass that will help you navigate through from one place to another. You're just lost in a let's say a world of speculation. Read that one again.
With 6, everything relative, there are no absolutes.
Okay, everything is relative. That means nothing is absolute. There's no such thing as the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead. Everything is relative. Relative means one thing depends on another thing, that depends on another thing, that depends on nothing. So there's no absolute truth.
By this false concept, one leads to a irresponsible life without a moral compass and rejects the authority of God and His instructions.
Yeah, you just do whatever your mind says to do. If your mind says, go and kill this person, you go and kill that person. Right? There's no moral compass, there's no morality. There's whatever you think, that's it.
7. Inflated false ego. The false ego, which develops by identifying with the temporary material body instead of the eternal soul, engenders false pride, false prestige, illusion, false association, ignorance of the eternal soul, material lust, anger and greed, bewilderment, and refusal to surrender to the will of God. One thinks, I am this body and everything related to his body is mine.
So this is the bodily identification. I am this body. They don't believe in a soul. They just identify with the body. And because of that, they develop all these false ideas. This body is better than that other bodies. This race is better than another race. This ethnicity is better than another ethnicity. It creates all these prejudices and false concepts. Go ahead.
8. Being too materially attached, one neglects spiritual life. The attraction between male and female is the basic principle of material existence that becomes solidified by sex into a hard knot of lusty attachment. To body, husband and wife to husband, home, property, children, relatives and wealth thinking. This is
you misread something there. It's body to body relationships.
Oh, body to, oh, okay. One body, that word is missing, Maharaj.
It is?
Yeah. One.
It just says body?
Only two body is there.
Only what?
Yeah.
What does it say?
A hard knot of lusty attachment to body.
Okay, a hard knot of lusty attachment to the body. Okay, go ahead.
To body, husband to wife and wife to husband, home, property, children, relatives and wealth thinking. This is my house, this is my land, this is my family, this is my country. One ignores that these attachments are temporary and will end at death. Thus, one becomes preoccupied with the temporary things and ignores eternal spiritual reality.
Yeah, and which one is that? Is that number
Eighth one, Maharaj.
8? Yeah.
Being too
Yeah,
material.
we just have to add in there that there's only body to body relationships. There's no soul to soul relationship. So body to body relationship is a complete illusion. It's rather than seeing the soul, one only sees the body, and the body is a temporary thing, and it's always changing. So people become very frustrated in the end because they grow old, and they get sick, and eventually they're going to die, and they just believe I am this body, right? And all their relationships are body to body relationships. There are no soul to soul relationships. Go ahead.
9. Fear of an eternal personal identity of one's body. This is due to falsely identifying with the body that gradually grows old and sick. Due to ignorance, one believes that the old body will not continue eternally. Often, such persons prefer suicide rather than eternal life. They have no knowledge of their eternal soul and its eternal spiritual body that remains forever youthful and full of vitality in the spiritual world.
Right. So once you believe I'm only this body, then people actually believe that, okay, well, my body is old now, I'm getting sick, I don't see how I'm ever going to be happy again. So let me commit suicide legally. You can go to Oregon right now and commit suicide legally. It used to be illegal. You could go to jail if you tried to help someone commit suicide. But nowadays, it's become legal in some states, not all the states. So you see, because if someone thinks I'm only this body, and the body gets old and sick, they say, well, I don't really have a future, so let me stop everything now, and they commit suicide. Right? But they can do it legally now, whereas before it was not legal. Go ahead.
Read the next one. 10. Conception of void due to frustration in life. When one experiences unending physical or mental suffering in life, one may desire to merge into a void where there is no more suffering and no more consciousness. This is a false conception of life caused by ignorance of spiritual knowledge.
So that's basically the Buddhist theory that the way to solve all problems of life is to stop thinking, stop desiring, and make a blank in your brain, right? And merge into nothingness. Go ahead.
11. Disbelief in reward and punishment under God's laws of karma. God instructs people in two ways. One, by revealing holy scriptures so people avoid sinful acts and engage in righteous endeavors. 2, by establishing laws of karma that keep people in the material world, life after life, to suffer until they begin to ask the question, why am I suffering? If they meet a genuine, knowledgeable, saintly person who can explain the laws of God, karma, they can be free themselves from the cycle of birth and death and attain eternal life of joy without suffering.
Yeah. Okay, next.
12. Mechanical tech progress is the greatest progress for humanity. Materialists are convinced that the construction of skyscrapers, airplanes, cars, roads, cell phones, computers, rockets, washing machines, and all sorts of modern inventions and pharmaceutical medicines, etc., for improving the quality of life are the greatest achievements of mankind.
They're not. They've actually ruined things. Go ahead.
This is an illusory concept. The proof is that after 500 years of scientific innovations and massive industrial production, there are serious problems with environmental toxicity, climate change,
environmental toxicity,
climate change, wars, drug addiction, mental health problems, fear of economic collapse, and anxious doubts of mankind's existence on the earth planet.
Yeah, you're going to see this week they're going to be talking a lot about the possibility of economic disaster because of the failing of this big internet bank in Silicon Valley. Now, other banks have gone bankrupt also, and all week they'll be talking about the possibility of depression and people getting laid off and this thing and that thing. So you're experiencing right now, we're going to experience right now exactly what's here. The idea that, science and material prosperity and making money is going to solve all people's problems. But actually, it's creating problems. So go ahead.
13. False theories of how to solve problems of humanity. There are many false prophets, politicians, businessmen, philosophers, scientists, and other venerable enlightened persons who declare to the general public false theories that seem to be solutions to alleviate problems in life. Driven by selfish desires, such plans and strategies, if accepted by people, eventually help the so-called genius to become rich and powerful and make people dependent. Examples of this are economic, industrial, and technological advancement will solve the problems of mankind, or social welfare programs will eliminate inequalities in society, etc. Such speculative plans and theories simply give false hope to people and divert their attention from real solutions to life's problems.
Real solution is Krishna consciousness, but people are being fooled all the time by all these promises of the scientists and the philosophers, and they ignore the shastras, they ignore real spiritual knowledge, and they just depend on these false theories.
Should I read the talk?
Yeah.
Beware of massive weapons of societal degradation. The following are a list of destructive achievements of the so-called enlightened persons. Scientists have created weapons of mass destruction such as atom bombs, missiles, military weapons.
Yeah, these are the best things that the scientists have created. Bombs, atom bombs, nuclear bombs, and all kinds of poisons and things like that. This is their greatest, and you see it in the Ukraine now. Every week the United States is sending more weapons to Ukraine, and the Russians are using more and more weapons to destroy Ukraine. So you see, this is the best creations of the scientists, these weapons of mass destruction. And it's big business, big business. Go ahead.
Infotech people who have created weapons of mass distraction such
What's
as...
that? Which people?
Second one, Mark.
What is it?
Mass distraction.
No, who are those people?
Such as social media, video games. So infotech people who have created weapons. Infotech.
Infotech people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said it so quick, I didn't understand.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, infotech people have created weapons of mass distraction such as social media, video games, virtual reality.
Yeah, can you hold the microphone up to your mouth? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Infotech people have created weapons of mass distraction such as social media, video games, virtual reality.
Yeah, what it does is helps you waste time. You just go into the internet and the cell phone and the television and the radio and all these things. It's just a waste of time. Go ahead.
Politicians have created weapons of mass deception with lies, broken promises, wars, artificially created crises to keep people in anxiety.
Yes, and we discussed that yesterday. When there's anxiety, then you make fast decisions, and you decide to buy things or go places. Just like during Y2K, before year 2000, there was a lot of publicity that the world would become chaotic because all the computers were not calibrated to deal with the change of the century. So therefore, everything would crash on the first day of the new century. And therefore, everyone was in anxiety that, we have to take our money out of the bank, we have to move away from where we lived to some far-off place and then we have to stockpile a lot of food and have guns and ammunition and things like that. So people became very, very paranoid what's going to happen on the first day of the new century, right? And so I was giving lectures at that time, and people were worried. A lot of people, whenever there's problems, a lot of people come to the temple. And I said, don't worry, we have plenty of food and we'll feed you. Don't worry about that. You can come to the temple and we'll help you if there's any breakdown of society or a lack of food, etc. So Y2K happened and nothing happened, right? Now there's one devotee. He was in Arizona. He was managing 2 temples. He maxed out the credit cards of the temples, both temples, and he used all that money to buy a property in a remote place in New Mexico. And he was going to move the deities there. Fortunately, he didn't get to do that. And when Y2K happened, nothing happened. But he put both temples into bankruptcy.
Oh.
The property he bought, he did not pay attention when he bought it. He didn't have a legal entrance to that property. So all the money he spent to buy the property actually was lost because no one would buy it. There's no legal entrance into the property. He was so, let's say, emotional. He didn't pay attention to study the property that he was going to buy. He thought, well, it's cheap, I can buy it. So he actually ruined 2 temples and misled everybody in the community and caused great havoc. When the people who were coming to those 2 temples found out what he did, they got really upset because basically he put both temples into bankruptcy. You see what happens when you don't believe Krishna. You begin to believe all this nonsense, Y2K, this thing, that thing. So people make these fast decisions when they get scared. Anyway, Prabhupada has taught us that the world is not going to come to an end right now. You have at least another 400,000 years before this world will have a breakdown. So if you believe what's in the Shastra, you won't make these crazy decisions. But if you get scared by all these doomsday theories, then you make these crazy decisions and it ends up being a disaster. Okay, go ahead.
Hollywood, Bollywood, and social media have created weapons of mass perversion by glamorizing sex, intoxication, meat eating, gambling, and self-indulgence.
Is that a fact? Like you see the Bollywood movies, do they show, guns? They show gangsters. They show sex type of things. They show, they glorify the gangsters who have really nice clothes and big cars. And so you see, it's all perversion, all perverted things. Years ago, the Bollywood movies were good, but they're no good anymore. Bollywood, Hollywood is the same thing. All sense gratification. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
False Brahmanas, priests, have created weapons of mass materialism by pursuit of materialistic goals in the name of religion.
Karma kanda.
Karmakanda.
Yeah, they're doing materialistic rituals. How your business will do better, how your sickness will go away, how you'll become famous, this thing, that thing. There was this one devotee, he at one time wanted to become very powerful. So he started to practice black magic. And he would go out on the Juhu beach late at night and slaughter a chicken or something like that and offer it to Mother Kali and do these crazy things. He was studying black magic. In India, that you can find people doing black magic and learn from them. And he did that to get powerful, right? To develop powers. So, I mean, it's a complete disaster for him. He lost his Krishna consciousness completely by doing that. There was another devotee, he was actually a sannyasi, and this young girl became very sick and she was like haunted by a ghost. So he decided to take her and himself to a Durga temple during the Durga Puja period, and this was in this is in South America, in Guyana, and he witnessed a Durga worship, very horrible worship of Mother Durga, where they kill animals, they drink the blood, and they're screaming all night and dancing, and after that he fell down, and that girl didn't get better; she got worse, right? So when people lose faith in Krishna consciousness and chanting Hare Krishna, and then adopt these other ways of so-called controlling nature or becoming powerful or healing sickness and so forth, basically Durga worship and things like that, it causes a complete disaster. And he fell down. He was a sannyasi. He was a very good devotee. He fell down, left Krishna consciousness after experiencing that all-night puja. Okay. I don't think you've ever seen these things before. It's very horrible.
It's very tough experience, Maharaj. Whoever goes through with these things, it's like gives a lot of deep impression on brain. It's not easy to handle.
Yeah, they'll be screaming all night. The women's hair will be all over the place. They're shaking their head. Their hair is real long, and they're screaming, and then they're killing the animals, drinking the blood. It's very horrible. It's not something you really don't want to see or experience.
Next is industrialists have created weapons of mass pollution with industries and their products that pollute the environment.
Right.
The next, feminists and male social engineers have created weapons of mass disruption.
Disruption of marriage.
Disruption of harmonious married life and encouraging divorces or open marriages.
Yeah, open marriage means husband and wife both have other partners for sense gratification. Yeah, it's terrible. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, that's all, Maharaj.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll finish this tomorrow. Why are we spending time on this? Because this 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is very important if you want to understand who you are and how to advance in Krishna consciousness and the different levels of consciousness that you can have. Okay, we'll stop there. Are there any questions? Yes. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, when like Darwin's theory, when it's called the evolutionary theory, why do when it's called a like they say theory in the name evolutionary theory? So I've been wondering, would it be considered like that the scientists claim it is a myth? Because they're calling it also a theory, right?
Well, yes, a theory means something that is not absolutely proven to be true. It's an idea that they have based on some observations that they've made, and they come up with a theory, and then they have to prove that that theory is actually true. So they do different types of experiments, and if the theories that they have is true for like 10% of the time, or 20% of the time, or 30% of the time, it's just a theory. If it's close to 50% of the time, it's a scientific theory. It's still not a fact. Fact has to be 100% true, you see. So anything that's called a theory is not 100% true. It may have, sometimes it may be.
They're considering it true. They haven't gotten to 100%, so why are they just like saying, why are they teaching it in school?
Because they don't have anything else. Because they're only studying matter. They're not studying matter and spirit. They're not studying the spiritual world and the material world. They're only studying the material world. So therefore, you're never going to have a complete fact. You just have theories. Because you're not studying all of reality. You're just studying 1/4 of reality. The material world is no more than 1/4 of the domain of Krishna. You see? So if let's say you only study your feet, you don't study your legs, you don't study the stomach, you don't study your head. So how much would you understand about the body?
Probably about like 5%.
Yeah, like 5 or 10%, you see? So they're only studying matter, but there's a lot more than just matter. There's spirit also. And spirit is much more than matter. You see? So they come up with these theories that are not even proven. Like Darwinism, there's no proof that everything came from matter that organized itself. There's no proof of that. There's no experiments showing that. So,
Did they ever actually experiment?
yeah, they do, but they've never done an experiment in which matter organized itself into a living being. You see. You can try yourself. You'll see it won't work. Okay, so we'll stop. Okay, good.
Maharaj, one quick question.
Yeah.
So Maharaj, the Prajapita Brahma Kumar, we are studying about various stages, right? About the realization, the realization, right? So there's Prajapita Brahma Kumari, those people
There's
who
what?
Prajapita Brahma Kumari.
Okay, the Brahma Kumaris.
Brahma Kumaris, yeah, they call it Prajapita. Yeah, so they, what stage of consciousness or realization they have, means like?
Is it near zero?
Oh, okay.
Very near zero.
Because, so the reason I was asking, like, one guy came, the student from university, and then he volunteered for food truck yesterday, and he.
Yesterday?
Yesterday, and he came many times to temple also. Yeah, he had listened your classes also, but he was practicing this Brahma Kumari from 15 years. So I was asking few questions to him.
Is he still practicing?
He's still practicing. He's very, very strong belief in this, actually. So he says that, I mean, they have wrong concept. They say that Shiva has, and they don't believe in Shiva of the personal form, but the linga form, like
Shivam.
yeah, Shivlinga. They believe in Shivlinga. But not actual form of Shiva, and a lot of other things. And then Kumari means everybody is Kumari. He says that the female. So only female can be in charge or the head of those organizations, that Brahma Kumaris. And he has a lot of other, and Shiva has taught this Bhagavad Gita and a lot of things. But I was wondering, like, I don't know how to tell him, but what stage of, like, we did the Brahman realization, then Paramatma realization, the Bhagwan realization. So I was not sure, like, which realization they falls into.
Well, you're talking to someone who's basically crazy.
Okay. So we should not. So how we should guide them, Maharaj?
Just
like
give them prasadam.
Okay.
Don't take what they say seriously. In fact, don't even let them preach to you. But just keep giving them prasadam and acting in a friendly way.
Mm-hmm.
If they're trying to convince you of something, you say, well, listen, that's what you believe. I'm not trying to convince you of anything, so don't try and convince me of anything. Just take prasadam and be happy.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
And you can also chant Hare Krishna. You're basically dealing with a crazy person. You know.
I thought, what's your goal, final goal? He's a student. He's like very young, right? Like he's not married, but he wants to be like brahmachari throughout his life. I said, what is your goal? Like, what do you want to go at the end of your life? So he said, no, this body is something, I got it, but I'm a soul. I want to treat myself as a soul. I don't want to take care of my body. And okay, somebody hit you. So anyway, so he was giving some crazy.
No, it's basically crazy. But that's Brahma Kumaris are crazy people. But you can give them prasadam, and eventually you give them enough prasadam, they'll wake up and realize the whole thing is crazy. Yeah. Haribol. Okay, we'll have Aarti now. Go ahead, start.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Banamui Savadana Mate Chahara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatariya Jai
Chahara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatariya Jai
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jai Hoy Ite
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitite Koriya Kya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Kya
Arana Koriya Mane Asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asa
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
दे दे गाय जहाँ रचरित
वेदे गाय जनर चरित
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु
लोके न लोके रजीवाना
लोके नाथ लोके रचिवाना
हा हा प्रभु खोरो दोय देहमो पद छाया
हा हा प्रभु कोरो दोया देह मोरे पाद छाया
एबे गाइस गुसुप त्रिभुवाना
एबे यास कुसुकी भुवाना
शिल प्रभु तप तपवाना
शिल प्रभुपाद
पति तपवाना नमो श्री प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद
जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद
जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा
जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा
नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी नित्यानामिने
नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी इति नामिने
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य विषतारिणे
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य विषतारिणे
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गौरराध शिव सरित गौर भक्त वृंदा
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरि गौर भक्त वृंदा
हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Gaura Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Premanandi Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravaja Gachasta Tarasatya Shishi Shamad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Pranansaka Hoshi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Dvaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Guru Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Swami Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Samavita Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Bhakti Smata Bhakti Smata Namaste Sasara Devi Nirvisesa Sunivari Paskati Dasatani. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great honor and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and attain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master, the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto me. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter in lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hari Bol.